On today's series on the benefits of localized circularity as a service, we're going to be talking about enabling rapid deployment of production manufacturing. People assume that 3D printing is typically a prototyping tool, something you do in order to test the models before you then go on to production. But there are lots and lots of problems with doing that. Probably the most relevant one is the expense of manufacturing as a whole. When you go from relatively low-cost prototyping to very high-cost intensive manufacturing, it costs a lot of money to get there. And this is often why a lot of businesses struggle to move from the prototyping stage into the production stage, because they cannot find the necessary funding to actually build and deploy the necessary setup for productionizing their inventions. It's not uncommon for there to be anywhere between 150 and over £250,000 worth of investment, because most of those require packaging, require transportation, and of course the intensity of energy creates a problem for the climate. Not only that, most of the stuff we end up producing consumes natural resources and then delivers an inordinate amount of waste. And it's no great secret that we know that 340 million tons of plastic rubbish is disposed of every single year. But it's not just the emissions within that, it's also the embodied emissions from the manufacturing and transportation, which we talked about before. And all of this comes in the context of a changing geopolitical and environmental climate. Because most of the products that you spend so much money to get set up and built is starting to be affected by supply chain disruption, whether that's geopolitical instability, climate change, or even war now. So much so that there are lots and lots and lots of points of failure within that system. And you, as the person who is manufacturing and marketing a product, have to be aware of every single one, especially as they start to become more prevalent. We're seeing more disruption within the Middle East and crucial trade corridors. We're starting to see climate change affect factories in China, which is the economic powerhouse normally associated with large-scale manufacturing, and most of that has downstream impacts on the supplies and your ability to sell as a business in the UK, or indeed anywhere else. So what we do, of course, at Automed is we deliver decentralized edge manufacturing. Now, edge manufacturing is the concept of actually producing the product as close to, if not at, the site that it's actually going to be used at. So when we talk about the need to deploy localized circular microeconomies, this is part of the wider concept, if you like, of city manufacturing. And we do that through a combination of manufacturing and effectively localized supply. So transportation is only last mile, if that. The collection of waste comes from the local area as well. So that's where you're not transporting waste to centralized facilities, incinerating them, or trying to export them abroad. All of that waste is dealt with by our facilities, and that is turned into products only when people need them. No more, no less. And that ensures that the larger scale transportation that normally has to wait for entire containers to be filled doesn't exist, and only manufacture what you need, not a minimum order quantity from that manufacturer. Because in our case, we're able to go down as far as a single item. And this is a radical departure from conventional supply chains, because it means that cities themselves can become virtual factories in their own right. Instead of disposing waste through the private sector and the benefit of that waste as financial return disappearing off into, well, dare I say, the ether, or indeed exporting it elsewhere, and all of it not returning anything to the local residents of a particular area, now waste can become the material which is used to create the products, parts, accessories that local communities, schools, and businesses actually need, including creating local manufacturing ecosystems where once they didn't exist. So the ideas and concepts around microfactories and even nanofactories start to provide a way to create more resilient supply chains, because you're now not dependent on conventional international or globalized supply chains, which are already being disrupted, as we've started to see over the last few years. I mean, if you think, for example, about conventional injection molding or blow molding, you start to see that even the first 1,000 items cost you an absolute fortune just to get started. In fact, although I've presented injection molding and blow molding here, you will not be basically encouraged to produce this small volume of products because it isn't cost effective. you will never make your money back on the costs of these items by only selling 1,000 of them. The costs to injection mold, as you can see here, are significant. There are multiple steps and all of them quite cost intensive. In contrast, both reallyrecycle.com and Automedi provide smaller scale entrepreneurs, small businesses and manufacturers with an alternative way to produce much lower volume of products for a much smaller cost for those first 1,000 items, for example. And the reason why that's important is because most local economies only ever need a few of these items anyway, especially when you first start as a business. So instead of trying to find all the money to try and invest about £100,000 in injection molding capacity and capability, what you can do instead is run much smaller cycles, get the cash flow in a much more rapid order, ideally then building up the financial means to then build out your injection molding requirement only when it's both proven its viability as a product, when you've got the money to do it, without needing to basically an investor or some other financial facility. Better still, or break even is a long way away, because as you start to scale to the first 100,000 items, even then you start to see that the costs of injection molding still become prohibitive. What typically happens between the reallyrecycle.com offer, which is basically a make-on-demand requirement, and Automedi's Really Recycle infrastructure, which is an enterprise-level tool that builds our circular microeconomies into existing larger-scale businesses, you can see that the crossover starts to make more sense, because you can then manufacture from your own waste as long as you produce enough waste and produce enough demand. So that creates an opportunity for you to transition seamlessly from the Really Recycle offer into Automedi's Really Recycle bridge. And both of those cases still result in a much lower cost compared to injection molding and blow molding. This is a game changer. Much higher yields from waste that you would otherwise simply be burning or throwing away. And instead, you're keeping all that value that would normally be lost downstream, while at the same time saving upwards of 90% of the emissions from your supply chains in various different categories. And as we've shown in some of the case studies before, in ecosystems like Greater Manchester, we've shown a very significant saving even on relatively small scale projects. So £10,000 worth of investment turned into £23,000 of actual throughput value in less than half the time that we had that investment for. So if we were to then extrapolate that, we would see that we would get round to a 5-to-1 ratio, nearly a 5-to-1 ratio for every pound spent in terms of the return, as long as you could sell those downstream products, while increasing the amount of recycling by 130, when I say recycle, I mean remanufacture, by 135 times compared to the existing waste collection facilities and recycling facilities that were normally developed and deployed within Greater Manchester. And as you can also see, it's an almost 4-to-1 carbon saving as well. So this solves multiple issues. It's an elegant solution that ensures that you can avoid and indeed sometimes even sequester much of the carbon associated with the production, because you're then helping fund many of the natural regeneration and rewilding projects that need to occur in the region to help improve air quality, improve mental health, and indeed public health more generally. And it doesn't stop there. I mean, as an example of some of the enterprise projects, this process improves the recycling rates and the reduction of carbon versus conventional kind of awareness campaigns, which actually aren't that effective. We've shown a much higher return by deploying these mechanisms of almost allowing people just to do what they want anyway, and doing the work behind the scenes to improve the situation by massively increasing recycling rates and also massively reducing carbon emissions by producing products needed for those enterprises. A manufacturer anywhere in the world can deploy their products virtually on our supply chain, and then it can be manufactured in their target market without needing all the physical entities or actors to work together in your entire supply chain. That reduces project management requirements, it reduces customers' needs when you're trying to plan and design this stuff. And this also radically reduces the burden and barrier to entries from local manufacturers or small-scale entrepreneurs who want to bring products to market fast. So if you'd like to get in touch with us about our platform and how we can help you deploy your products globally across our infrastructure, get in touch at hello@reallyrecycle.com. Until next time.